topic is motivating and recognizing volunteers. We have Renata Farias, our UNV Programme Officer from Cabo Verde, who will speak to us about a very concrete example, Volunteer Passport, a tool that they use to recognize volunteer experience.
I am Renata Farias, Programme Officer in Cabo Verde. I am here since October 2011. So, to talk about the passport, I have to go back to 2009. So in 2009, UNV, UNDP, and the government of Cape Verde, through the Ministry of Youth and the Cape Verdian platform of NGOs, have started the implementation of a government-led initiative to implement a national volunteer program in Cape Verde. That project had two specific goals. First of all, the idea was to create an environment favorable to the development of volunteers. And second, create a national volunteer program. In order to create an environment encouraging of volunteers, we needed to advance it in two fronts. To create a legal framework on volunteers and to recognize and promote volunteers. As you can see, these two strategies are intimately connected. A legal framework makes recognition possible and easier. On the other hand, recognition from society legitimates and gives strength to and effectiveness to the framework. You might be asking, so what exactly is the volunteer passport? So, according to the legal definition, it's a record, an administrative, chronological record that should summarize one's participation in volunteer activities under the legal regime of volunteer, under the definition, the legal definition of volunteers in Cape Verde. The passport is issued by the National Volunteer Corps, as I mentioned, is the governmental agencies. And volunteers have to basically fill two conditions. They have to give their contribution, their volunteer contribution within the volunteer program in an accredited organization. That's number one. Number two is they must have completed at least 120 hours of volunteer work by the time that they request the passport. In order to get that accreditation, the volunteer involving organizations must undergo a training program on volunteer management and volunteer programming. They must also submit a volunteer program that will be approved by the National Volunteer Corps.
How did the idea for a volunteer passport come up?
As I told you, we have a very informal volunteers in Cape Verde. Volunteer involving organizations are in a very low level of institutional development, and they are not very, very structured. From April through December 2013, over 80 organizations from 4 different islands participated in training programs. As a result of those trainings last year, 20 programs were submitted so far. So that brings us to the challenges. I think the first one is regards acceptance and ownership. As I've mentioned, we have a large number of organizations that are poorly structured. Second challenge that I find very important is that the full implementation of the passport initiative depends on partnerships.
We have a question from India, and greetings besides the question. Michael from India is asking us who is issuing the volunteer passport.
Yeah, it's the National Volunteer Corps that issues the passport. National Volunteer Corps is a governmental agency that has the mandate to promote volunteers in Cape Verde.
I'm a member of the portfolio team, the East Africa portfolio in UNV headquarters. My question is more for the purposes of learning from Cape Verde. You mentioned a project. Was it a UNV-funded project? And if yes, what are the next steps, the exit strategies for this project? You're talking about the fact that the National Volunteer Corps is very weak. Will the UNV project build capacity in that corps?
Yes, the project was UNV. It was UNV funded. UNDP local funds from the Living as One funds. We also had some other funds from Spain by means of through fully funded volunteers, and of course governmental funding. The creation of the corps was not exactly in the initial project. The project started in September 2009 and ended in February this year. We have done, during the project there was some capacity building, some capacity development for the national partner, but we have come to the conclusion in the late evaluation, very recent evaluation, that we should probably need an extra phase. And discussing with the portfolio, we have come to the conclusion that the best support UNV could give right now to this volunteer corps that is still with the end of the project, seeing what are the next steps, see what are their strengths, see what are their gaps or their needs, to assess their needs. It's probably to support them in conducting a strategic plan.
I wanted to take the opportunity to with the excellent question from Josephine, to pitch, to advertise, if I may say so, the knowledge products that we have just launched this week on volunteer infrastructure. And in fact, the report in Cabo Verde speaks about the experience in the project, what worked well, what needs to be further improved, achievements and so forth. So it's downloadable from the UNV website.